Have you ever experienced that strange chill? As if something invisible were there behind a gentle gaze. A fleeting but disturbing feeling. A sense that something isn't right even if you don't know why. What is it? The explanation may come from something Carl Jung studied throughout his life, the human unconscious. He uncovered patterns that not only explain this unease, but also reveal one of the greatest psychological dangers we face, often without realizing it. Imagine being in a conversation where everything seems calm until someone starts making accusations against you. Suddenly, they speak with such certainty as if they had access to something deep about your soul. But deep down you know, that's not your truth. It's not reflecting who you really are. In reality, it's a projection, a part of you that they can't see, so they cast that shadow over you. Jung called this shadow projection. It's the rejected, repressed, or denied parts of a person, those that they can't accept in themselves, so they transfer them onto others. The further someone moves away from their own self, the more they tend to see their flaws and fears in others. And what happens when this behavior is repeated? It stops being just an involuntary reaction and becomes something chronic, a psychic reality built on projections. For the human psyche, this internal reality becomes as real as the world around us. That's why, when someone starts projecting their shadow onto you, it's essential to stand firm in what you know to be true. If you don't protect yourself, the projected reality can begin to influence your own mind. Absolute certainty has something hypnotic about it. A firm gaze, sure words, a confidence that seems invulnerable. This posture attracts, earns respect, and silences others. But what appears to be wisdom is actually blindness. Jung knew that true wisdom is not built on certainty, but on constant doubt. True conscience never locks itself into a dogma. It observes, questions, and reflects. But when the ego allows itself to be dominated by the shadow, that hidden side of the psyche full of fears and repressed desires, it closes itself into a fortress of unfounded certainties, forgetting essential doubt. This closure of the ego creates a comfortable prison, where the individual no longer seeks the truth, but only reaffirms their own beliefs without questioning. The biggest problem arises when someone tries to challenge them. The more they are challenged, the more solid their conviction becomes. This is because they are not listening to the world around them, but live in an internal reality shaped by narratives that justify the rigidity of their thinking. The ego in this state becomes an absolute judge, defining what is right and wrong, who deserves to be heard and who should be ignored. This is the territory of psychic inflation. When the ego identifies with something greater, an ideology, an archetype, or a moral mission, it feels superior, almost divine. The great danger occurs when this person not only believes that they are right, but also that they are the very embodiment of the truth. At this point, any questioning is not just a criticism of the idea, but a threat to their identity. Blind certainty offers an illusion of security. Doubt demands humility and puts us in a state of vulnerability. Unshakable conviction, on the other hand, offers narcissistic comfort, isolating the individual from life and others. The mind is trapped in a space of mirrors where it only sees itself without listening to others, without opening up. Jung warned that evil begins where doubt ends. In doubt, the soul breathes, consciousness expands and transforms. When the ego refuses to doubt itself, it not only distances itself from the truth, but becomes its greatest enemy. And when the ego becomes impervious to listening and its certainty is unquestionable, we are no longer facing wisdom, but a closed mind, possessed by the shadow. True ego possession is dangerous because there is no longer a person responsible for your actions. Only the shadow speaking in the name of the Absolute. Behind so much certainty, what appears to be truth is actually a prison. And the more attractive it seems, the more difficult it is to realize that we are actually imprisoned within ourselves. In order to adjust to collective demands, each person creates a disguise. Carl Jung called this representation a persona, a facade that allows you to circulate in different scenarios, alternating professional, family, or social roles. It works as a tool for adaptation, ensuring more fluid interactions. The big problem arises when this clothing is no longer seen as just a temporary apparatus and becomes confused with one's own identity. This mistake is often accompanied by a fascination with outward perfection. There are calculated smiles, impeccable speech, and meticulous gestures that never reveal any flaws in front of others. However, an emotional price is charged. The genuine part of each being, with its impulses and insecurities, ends up hidden. What doesn't fit the idealized pattern, desires, jealousy, irritation, and other shadows, is thrown into an intimate basement. In this inner space, everything remains alive, growing in intensity. No repressed memory simply disappears, it thickens and waits for the moment to emerge. The more polished the facade, the more violent the confined part tends to be. It's as if there were a flawless public theater, but behind the scenes, flames were burning uncontrollably. The tension becomes unsustainable because keeping the image crystal clear requires constant effort and endless vigilance. A single slip, a small crack in the impeccable performance, can bring down this artificial construction. The body, truer than the mind, often sends out warning signals. There can be sudden anxiety, diffuse nausea, or silent unease in the presence of someone who is too perfect. There is something instinctive that indicates absolute perfection does not belong to the human. The real essence cannot be erased indefinitely. Jung used to point out that moving away from one's core creates emotional illnesses. Without noticing the source, certain individuals face chronic irritation, constant emptiness, and repeated frustrations. These symptoms point to a crisis in the relationship between the image the world sees and what dwells within. When the persona becomes a prison, vital energy contracts and the soul suffers in silence. What has been hidden away in the inner warehouse one day finds a way to surface. Sometimes it emerges through agitated dreams or previously unthinkable behavioral outbursts. It can manifest itself in apparently simple faults, in bursts of emotion, or in a silent collapse that surprises even those who experience it. An impeccable facade often resembles a sculpture, attractive on the outside, but lacking in vital warmth. The real human, with its frailties and spontaneity, remains confined in the name of collective approval. Living this way is deeply draining as the authentic essence gradually fades away, leading to a slow withering away from the inside out. That's why it's important to be wary of any image that presents itself as invincible. This caution is not born of malicious suspicion, but of genuine compassion. Sometimes behind that subdued smile, there is a spirit crying out for liberation. Renewal really happens the moment you break through the barrier of appearances and face without fear the confusion that has been hidden. Contrary to popular belief, the danger is rarely the word itself, but the intention present in each phrase or gesture. The subtle force that drives our actions is the true element capable of hurting or healing. Living awake requires constant effort, because every social encounter brings into play calculated characters, hidden segments, collective symbols, and an I that tries to impose itself as the whole truth. Denying these dynamics makes anyone hostage to them. Awakening involves recognizing the psychic duels that take place behind everyday dialogues, understanding that the other person may be facing internal storms that lead them to project insecurities onto those around them. Above all, it means seeing that we are also vulnerable to these influences. Therefore, it's not up to us to judge others, but to develop a compassionate gaze and at the same time turn our attention inwards with deep honesty. It is in this intimate territory that our forgotten part hides. Only by accepting it can we transcend the game of accusations and defenses, assuming the position of someone who is aware. As the Swiss scholar reinforced, it's not enough to idealize luminous visions. What was in darkness must be made visible. Throughout life, each individual builds masks and pushes unwanted content into the unconscious. This process, although common, causes constant tension as the rejected part remains active and often manipulates gestures and attitudes without being noticed. Carl Jung described a path that aims to align these aspects, unifying what is apparent and what has remained hidden. This is called the process of individuation. Individuation is not synonymous with perfection, but with internal unity. It occurs when someone decides to face their contradictions, understanding that they are not limited to a socially approved image or a set of repressed defects. Instead of plastering the personality in an idealized role, individuation suggests dialoguing with what one has tried to ignore. By recognizing what has been rejected, the person finds psychic energy that was previously focused on sustaining appearances. There is a quote attributed to Jung that illustrates this well. Knowing our dark side is the most efficient way to understand what dwells in other people. This way, instead of just reacting to other people's faults, we can realize that we are all subject to untamed impulses. With this, self-criticism stops being painful and becomes an opportunity for genuine growth. The path proposed by individuation does not prescribe neutralizing negative emotions, but rather integrating them in a healthy way. In this way, the ego stops acting as an implacable judge, making room for a broader consciousness. When you make peace with these inner currents, there is less need to project mistakes onto others. Communication becomes more authentic and relationships gain in depth. No one can become whole without looking at what has been silenced. There are no easy shortcuts to this kind of liberation, as it involves sincerity with oneself. It requires the courage to abandon illusory rigidity which, although it offers a sense of security, prevents true identity from flourishing. In this sense, the invitation of individuation goes beyond simple social adaptation. It is a call to live with wholeness, balancing light and shadow within one's own psyche, without fear of recognizing the totality of who we are. After recognizing and integrating these hidden parts of ourselves, the next step is to apply this new understanding to the world around us. Recognizing our own shadow and that of other people allows us to interact in a more authentic and empathetic way. Instead of automatically reacting to the masks we encounter, we can realize that behind them there are human beings who, just like us, are struggling with their own internal battles. True freedom doesn't come from denying our imperfections, but from accepting that we are all a complex mixture of light and shadow. By embracing our wholeness, we become more compassionate and less quick to judge. This doesn't mean letting go of the persona when necessary, but understanding that it's not our definitive identity. It's just a part of us, one of the many faces we present to the world. So the journey to living more consciously begins with a simple but profound internal movement, looking inwards with courage. It is in this radical honesty that we can finally free ourselves from the bonds of ego, projection, and social masks. And in doing so, we can move closer to who we really are, living with authenticity and acceptance. Did you like what you found here? Show your support with a like. Share your impressions in the comments and subscribe to receive more reflections on self-knowledge. In this way, we help each other to grow in understanding and awareness.